welcome to another video. This is Raw Deal, this is Yakov, and today we're going to discuss a topic that I think is somewhat timely given some developments in our current society. In particular, these developments have to do with fasting and cleansing and other things that people are doing nowadays that are aimed at cleansing their body, giving them more health, or whatever other reason may be advertised by the people, selling or doing or supervising cleanses or fasts and so on. In particular, today I would like to discuss a particular cleanse, a procedure, a kriya from yogic arsenal that's aimed at cleansing the intestine. Moreover, it's cleansing the intestine from top of your mouth down to where it comes out the other end. So it really takes care of the whole system, of the whole digestive system. And this is a very important procedure, so I would like to warn you and really draw your attention that this procedure is not to be taken lightly. This is not some, okay, I understood, after watching your video how to do it, and I'm just gonna go and jump off the deep end and, do it. What you need to understand that this is not just a physiological cleanse. That's just the one effect. I would even say this is not the biggest effect. The bigger part of this procedure is how it affects your energy. So how it cleanses the energetic body of the person doing it. And the effects of that cleanse may be unintended. And when I say unintended, I don't mean to say that it's going to do something scary to you. What I mean is that these effects may be unexpected, right? So you might have some unexpected experiences when it comes to your psyche, your emotions, or your mental states. So if a person is not prepared, they may not be ready, and that in turn could lead to some undesirable things. So I'm really warning you to take this seriously, do some reading, do some research, and follow closely what I'm about to convey, and certainly follow the warnings or the tips because they're important. So that said, I would also like to mention that I consider the most natural and best, if you will, way of cleansing your body to be fasting. And I would even say that fasting will cleanse you on both the physiological level and also the energetic level. So if you are familiar with how the yogic or Vedic or perhaps Ayurvedic worldview looks, you would know that there is the energy body that's kind of coupled with our physical body. In a way, the physical body is just a manifestation of what's going on in the energy body, in the more subtle body, in the, let's call it the invisible, right? To some, of course, it's invisible. To others who are a little more in tune, they can, of course, experience phenomena on that level. So it's not as perhaps esoteric to them or invisible to them. So that said, fasting really takes care of both of those things, because when we fast, we actually cleanse the physiological part, right? So there was a Nobel Prize recently given out for proving that if cells fast, they actually get rejuvenated. I forget, it was a couple of years ago. Some Japanese doctor, I think, received that Nobel Prize in medicine. Of course, all kinds of traditions, religions, and so on knew this for thousands of years, but it's good to know that the Western material science is catching up at last, at least in this respect. So the fasting will take care of the physiological part, but it's also important to understand that by fasting, we're essentially experiencing an austerity, right? And austerity, we can talk about this more. If you have questions, just comment and I can expound on the matter a little more. So austerity is one of the ways we address some problems in yoga. And by fasting, you actually experience austerity. So in fact, that will help your energetic body. So we could mention that it will accumulate some tapas, which is essentially, like I like to say, it's sort of a credit in the cosmic bank, right? So when the person suffers or just experiences austerity in general, well, they're either paying off the credit they took earlier, or they're actually earning and creating the positive balance, right? And what goes on with that balance, that's a subject with a whole separate video. But I'm just saying, if you're not as likely to really accept these things, or perhaps you're not, you haven't been exposed to these, just think of fasting as it's a thing that does the physiological. That's how your body works, and it cleanses. You get better health and other benefits and so on. So that's completely fine and completely natural to accept it that way. So fasting is the natural way. However, there are other ways, and there is this one way that I'm about to discuss that's called Shanka Prakshalana. So it's the Sanskrit term, and it's translated roughly like the cleansing or the washing of the shell. And the shell is the same shell as the seashell. So in fact, this video is probably accompanied by a thumbnail with some seashells on it, and it's exactly for this reason. So you can imagine that your stomach is like a seashell, and we're washing it, and the intestines and so on, and things get cleaner. So hence the name of the procedure. There's also a very closely related procedure called Lakhu Shanka Prakshalana. So Lakhu, the addition of that word, literally makes it mean the easy, the light version. So we're going to talk about the full procedure, and we're also going to discuss what the difference is for the light procedure. And once again, I strongly recommend that to gain the experiences and kind of get yourself started on this path, you do and try the light procedure first, because it's not as demanding both on time and your effort and your concentration and just the whole everything that's going to be involved with it. And then by doing it a few times, you will actually gain enough experience. You will know how your body behaves. You will know what to expect, what not to expect. You will learn the exercises that accompany this whole procedure. And anyways, you'll be a lot better prepared than just trying to tackle the whole thing at once. So that said, let's get into it. What's the procedure? So the outline of the procedure is that we're going to drink salty water, and there is a particular concentration of that salty water, which I will mention shortly here in a few minutes. We're going to drink salty water, and we will do certain exercises immediately following drinking the salty water. So suppose we drink a couple of cups, and we then do some exercises. And the exercises are done, there are only 5 of them. They're done in strict order, so you cannot shuffle these exercises. You have to do them one after another in the order indicated. This is important because that's how the procedure is done. And these exercises would facilitate opening valves in different parts of your digestive system, and they will facilitate the transfer and transport of that water throughout the whole system. So we start obviously from the mouth, then the water drops into your stomach. It might accumulate there for a bit, especially if the water is chilly, but in this case we're going to drink body temperature water, so you want to make it warm, because we actually want to facilitate the transfer from the stomach down to the intestine as soon as possible. If the water is cold, the way your body works, so if anything is cold, it will stay in your stomach, and the stomach will act as the heat exchanger. So your body will try to normalize the temperature because it does not want to cause problems in the intestine, because the intestines are much more sensitive parts compared to the stomach. So the stomach will basically close its bottom valve and hold whatever arrived until it gets warm enough to pass down. So incidentally, it will actually, if something was in the stomach, and suppose then something cold arrives from the top, the stomach will push down whatever was there before, and irrespective of whether it was fully digested or prepared, whether the job was done or not, if the cold thing arrives, it gets, whatever was in there, it gets pushed, right? So incidentally, that's why in the US, a while ago, there was like a habit perpetrated on the population of drinking cold and ice stuff, right? Of course, I imagine that back in the day when the fridges and ACs just appeared about 100 years ago, it was cool and novel, and it was interesting that you could drink icy cold stuff in the summer. And I'm sure, that novelty probably wore off, 2-3 years after fridges appeared, or maybe, after a family got their first fridge. But unfortunately, that got got installed throughout the society, throughout the eating culture. So now everywhere you go, of course, people come into the US, they're all surprised. I have European friends coming and visiting. They're always amazed why people drink everything with ice to make it ice cold. Well, and some think, okay, this is just an American culture. But yeah, that's an American culture. But I think personally there's a deeper reason. And the deeper reason is actually to make you eat more. And the way it works is just as I described. So the person ate something, and that something is being digested in the stomach. And of course, they might go and then have some dessert, some ice cream, or sip something. So that cold part arrives. So now your body is forced to actually press something down into your intestine just to help even out the temperatures. Just that's how the heat exchange works. So it's going to press down something from the stomach down into your intestine. And that something is not fully digested. So it's causing indigestion, and by that I don't mean some, acid refluxes or something like that. I literally mean your body is not fully able to digest all the nutrients from the food you eat, and then the person is forced to eat more, and that's why people are in this constant state of, I can't skip lunch because my body gets to the point of shaking, I get angry, and so on. But that's a whole different story. So a typical person acts that way, but if a body is functioning well, if the person really knows how to use their body, right, how this machinery operates, you should be able to easily, and I mean easily, like without skipping a beat, to go without food for 2-3 days. That should not be a big deal whatsoever. So that's a whole separate issue. Well, that said, let's get back to our topic. The water gets into your stomach. We do certain exercises. The first valve that will open will be the bottom of the stomach valve. So the water will get into, I'm not sure of the English term, but the first intestine that follows the stomach, it has 12 rings. So then it will get into the small intestine. There might be a couple of valves there that we will open. So, and then we'll do exercises that will actually facilitate transfer around this small intestine, because it weaves, it packs kind of tightly in the stomach area. So then we might open the valve, say leading to the large intestine, and then we'll facilitate the transfer through the large intestine, and then the water will start coming out. So that's roughly the idea, and we will do this over and over again, first until we start getting things to come out the other end, and then until whatever comes out actually comes out clear. So typically the rule of thumb for ending the procedure is to do it until the water that's coming out is clean, right? So it's actually crystal clean water. Of course, you might decide to end it earlier for some other reasons. Maybe you don't feel well and so on, so you have to pay attention. But the typical procedure is considered complete when the water comes out the other end clean. So that means, at least on the superficial level, you've cleaned your intestines and your digestive system to the best of the water's ability, right? There may still be stuff caked up onto the walls that just doesn't get parted with your intestine walls just with the basic water. So for that cleansing, you might need to change your nutrition long term, or you may need to fast for some extended period of time. And I know for a fact when people fast for say 2-3 weeks on water, parts of it could be dry fasting. A lot of stuff gets eliminated from the intestines, and that's because the body gets this ability when the digestion stops completely. So it gets the ability to actually work on what's going on there and start dumping a lot of this residue that's caked up. And literally sometimes pounds of nasty, dirty stuff will get eliminated from people. So that said, this procedure will help that, but it's not going to be as efficient, as effective as a 3 or 4 week fast, right? Because you can't expect a procedure that lasts a few hours to be as effective as something that you're doing for almost a month, right? It just doesn't work that way. So that's why earlier on I said fasting is the ultimate answer if done right, under right supervision, and so on. So all these preconditions need to be satisfied. So let's get back to our actual procedure. What is the water supposed to look like? The water is salty water, and I would say you need at least a gallon of it, and you need to make it body temperature or slightly warmer. Does not need to be hot, certainly should not be cold for the reasons I already described. So warm body temperature, so when it arrives to your body considers it, okay, this is something I don't need to hold, I can just dump it right into the intestine. So this will help along the whole process. So we drink a few cups of water. So good mugs or good cups, you drink, say 1 or 2, and then you do these exercises. You do 1 round of exercises. Then you go and drink another cup or 2. Then you do another round. Then you go drink another cup of 2. Then you do another round. So after first, say 2 or 3 rounds, you may go into your toilet and just sit down for 5 minutes and sit. You do not have to strain. You do not have to try to push anything out. Eventually things will start to come out. But sometimes it might take up to a few hours. Do not despair. Do not expect something to come out on the first try. You should just stay with the procedure. And if nothing happens, just go ahead and come out, drink some more water, do some more exercises. So typically after first 4 or 5 drinks and exercise rounds, if nothing has started to come out, then you can just do a few sets of just exercises. So what you might notice is that your whole stomach area will feel bloated. And that's expected because you're literally loading it up with water, so that's completely normal. So there might just be some areas, say in the large intestine, almost on the other end of the whole system, that maybe still has some food you ate from the day before. And what you should or should not eat, we will discuss. But maybe there'll be some food and the water is kind of pressing against that, so your body is trying to push the whole thing along. So until that gets pushed through, the water will not start to come out. But stay with it, and even 5 or 6 hours later, you will still have your first stool, and you will start the cleansing. So, and after that, you will basically do the water, do the exercises, do the water, do the exercises. So you should have the bathroom available and ready because you will need to use it quite often. Obviously, it helps if you have a shower in case you need it and so on. So it also helps if you're doing it in peace and quiet, obviously, because you should fully focus on the procedure. I shouldn't even mention that there should not be any television or radio or music and so on. This is a very kind of a personal and very kind of mindfulness-inducing thing. That's how you should treat it. You should treat it like a meditation, right? It would be, once again, I should really repeat myself, it would be insane if you try to do it with some television or radio or some other things playing around, or animals running around, or other humans running around. The only acceptable reason to have other humans around while you're doing that is, one, they're helping you, and how they can help you I will mention. And also another reason is that they're doing it with you. So there are 2 people doing this procedure at the same time. That's also acceptable. You know, aside from that, perhaps I can see another small reason. Maybe they're just very respectful and they know what you're doing, they know why you're doing it, and they're not wanting to participate, but they will try to help you and stay out of the way as much as possible. So I'm just giving you all these bits and tips that will help you be successful in doing this. So what should your digestion or your nutrition look like prior to this procedure? So I am on raw food diet, and I have a pretty good system I've set up for myself over the years in how I eat, what I eat, when I eat, and so on. So when it comes to my system, I pretty much have to do nothing because I can just wake up any morning and decide to do this procedure. That's how fine-tuned my nutrition and diet are compared to, say, to those of a regular person. So I can literally wake up any morning and decide to do this procedure. Now, it's not recommended because this procedure should only be done once in about 6 months. So it's a whole affair. It's 1 week before preparation. Then it takes a day of the actual procedure. Then you need to really come out from that procedure the next day properly. And then the whole week after the procedure, there are some restrictions, strict restrictions on what should or should not be eaten. So we'll discuss this in a second. So prior to the procedure, if you're eating a typical diet, what you should be doing is cutting all the animal products as much as possible. And I really suggest strongly that you cut them entirely. and really switch to lighter things, particularly if you can, to something plant-based and raw food-based, perhaps salads, maybe things like, I don't know, oatmeal and so on. Just something, think light, something that will really care for your digestive system. So that's the preparation. Immediately leading up to the procedure, so the night before and the day before, I would keep your diet really light. You know, if you can, try to fast if you're familiar with that, but certainly if you've never done fasting, I don't know if you may try or you may not want to try, but it could be beneficial if you fast the day before. That way you let the body actually cleanse what's already in the intestines as much as possible. So when you do the procedure with the water, it goes smoother, perhaps faster, and you are more successful. Now, what I am saying only applies to the full procedure. So the short version I'll describe at the end. You can do pretty much any morning, and you will see how it works. And actually, that short procedure is aimed at helping you get your stool and just your intestines functioning normally and regularly. So it will help heal or facilitate healing any problems you might have there. So that's how we prepare for the procedure. So it's best done early in the morning, say at about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. That's based on the circadian rhythms. That's when your large intestine wakes up. So I'm not sure if you've experienced that, but sometimes you may wake up and then you walk around. Even if you wake up early, say 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you can walk around for a few hours, and then at around 6 or 7, you want to go to the restroom. Now, if you wake up at, say, I don't know, 6 or 7, then you want to go to the restroom almost immediately. So I noticed that a while ago, and at first I thought it had to do with how much time had passed since I woke up, but now I understand that it's really more tied to the sun rhythm out there. So it's more about the particular timing and where the sun is that time of day that happens. So your digestive system wakes up, not just when you wake up, but there's a certain period when it wakes up. So it's better to catch the system when it's already awoke or have just awakened, and we start doing this procedure. So if you start about 6 or 7, easily a lot, at least, as I said, 7 or 8 hours, because this may extend. Some people get elimination very quickly and they just proceed very quickly. So in a couple of hours, they're essentially done. The first time I did it, it took me 8 hours because this thing got extended. So I was taking some breaks. I was doing exercises again. Then I would take some breaks again. But things went on, and I pretty much had whole day to do it. So I, remained calm and equanimous about it, and was successful with it. So we do it, and then immediately after this procedure, we rest. And by that, I don't mean we sleep, but we rest. We rest in that we can lie down or we can just sit down, but we should remain awake because there are certain problems that could happen if you go to sleep. So do not go to sleep. So 45 minutes to an hour after the end of the procedure, you need to eat. And the specific yogic way of eating is something, is a recipe that's made with rice and lentil. Sometimes they use other beans as well, but I will try to find a link to a recipe that you could use, so I will put it in the description of the video. So it's a recipe, it's a very soft product, it's a kind of like a cereal or oatmeal, think of a consistency like that. And it has a lot of melted butter in it, right? And the purpose of the butter is that it's there to help create a layer of these protective oils on the walls of your stomach, of your intestine, as you eat that, right? Because now the salty water has washed off all the protective slime and the layers that you had there. So we will cover this with these oils from the food that we first intake after the end of the procedure. So once that's done, you should spend another 2-3 hours trying to stay awake, and after that you can rest freely. So basically try not to fall asleep too early, because you might get headaches after that, might feel really groggy, and just the whole energetic situation will feel like it's really off balance. So it's not recommended, so I would take it quite seriously. One remark I would like to make about nutrition. So this recipe I'm describing is actually the standard traditional yogic, classic yogic recipe that follows this procedure. And my take on why it was done that way is that because yoga is done in different places. And to really recommend a certain recipe, right? So say, maybe there is some fruit growing in India that may be perfect and best for coming out of this procedure. Perhaps it's, say, durian or mango or something like that. They all have kind of a fatty qualities, right? Maybe we can use those. Well, what if yoga is done in, up in the mountains in Himalaya? You can't really get fruit there. But you still need some kind of a recipe that would work for everyone. So, and beans and lentil and rice and things like that, they are very common. There are staples everywhere. So my take on this particular recipe is that it exists and it's recommended after this procedure for those exact reasons. It's like the universal thing that will cover all the bases, all the locations. So when I personally came out of this procedure or come out of this procedure, I've used a variety of things. I've tried doing it with watermelon, and it works great. It works great for me. I tried doing it with coconut water. So coconut water actually has a lot of minerals in it. So the osmotic pressure, if anybody is familiar with the chemical term, is pretty high. So it's in a way, I'm saying that it's quite similar to salty water, right? And it needs to be mentioned that we drink salty water for the purpose of it not being digested, right? So if the water is just slightly salty, then we drink it and the body just digests it because the concentration of salt in that water inside the intestine is lower than the concentration in our body. So to even that out, our body will try to soak it in and basically dilute it, right? That way it's not very beneficial for us because we don't get the passage and we also absorb some new salt, and salt is not really good for you in the inorganic form. We should only get salts from things like, say, celery and tomatoes in their organic form. Those are really the forms that the body knows how to use best. So we need to get the concentration right, and the concentration is about, say, on 1 gallon of water, I recommend about 4 to 6 teaspoons, maybe with a little heap of salt. Try to use something like sea salt or Himalayan salt. That would be best. Don't use the white stuff that it might have some chemicals. So just try to avoid that. And that's the concentration. So the something called isotonic, so meaning the equal osmotic pressure. I believe it's a 0.9% solution of NaCl, so the natrium chloride or the sodium chloride, right? That's how it's called in the English world. Everybody calls it natrium because it's Na, so I'm not sure how you get sodium, but let's leave that aside. So sodium chloride, 0.9%, that's the threshold, right? So we want it slightly higher than that because if you make it too concentrated, it's quite unpleasant to eat. You might get a lot of thirst after that, right? And thirst is a normal thing, so you should really try not to drink anything after the procedure, as I mentioned, until about 45 minutes to 1 hour. And then you have that food, and then you still try not to drink for another 2-3 hours. So that's really important. So while that's happening, that salty water is actually sucking everything in from your body, and it's drawing all kinds of toxins, and it's helping the body cleanse. So that's what's going on. That's why it's important not to just go and try to drink a lot of water, and you will ruin the whole effect by doing it that way. So back to where I remained with the coconut water. So coming out from this procedure can be done with the coconut water because it's also quite high in the osmotic pressure. So in a sense, your body will consider it like food. And like my friend and acquaintance Kepra Anu taught me sometime in the past. He's a guy who is in Washington, D.C., very long-term raw foodist, and he has a restaurant there. So if you're ever in the area, you should check it out. And he taught me a while ago that coconut water will actually move bowels. And at the time I found it really surprising, but then I had some experience with it myself, and it's really true. So your body will consider it like food because of that reason, because it's quite high in the osmotic pressure. There is a lot, even though it doesn't taste like a lot of food, but chemically there is a lot going on in the coconut water, so your body will actually use it to move bowels. So we're essentially mimicking that with salt water, but you can come out on the coconut water, and then try to move the rest of that salty water out, and then basically that will be your feeding part. I can see that you can probably also come out on something like oatmeal. I would just be sure to add something like flax oil or say olive oil, just to mimic the melted butter in the traditional yogic recipe. And yeah, so for people who have some nutritional restrictions and who are following, say, plant-based diet and really want to stay with that, there are certainly ways to accommodate you. And I am a raw foodist. I've been raw vegan for over 3.5 years now, right? Soon will be 4, right? So I'm certainly not going to eat melted butter because I understood, I think, why that recipe existed in the first place. So, and I've successfully done this procedure and have come out of it using just completely plant-based, actually in my case, completely raw plant-based products. So that said, I hope you understand why it happens. So let's now discuss of what happens, say, after the first day, right? So one thing you need to understand that the resting continues even after the first day. So the day after, the first day after, is still should be dedicated to resting. You should not be, jumping around or attending some rock concerts. As I said, again, same with television and radio, that would be insane. You are trying to work with a procedure that's addressing some really interesting energy problems that people might have, which problems we will discuss in a second. So basically try to rest. If you have some yoga routines, I would skip those. If you have some exercise routines, I would skip those. So by resting, we mean just, you can still perhaps work intellectually, but I would not do heavy intellectual work. So it's light work and just giving yourself time to recover from the whole thing. So the week following this, there's some strict nutrition restrictions that you need to follow. So we can't eat spicy, we can't eat sour, so things like lemons and oranges and other things like pineapples, they're off limits. So you can't have those. Foods with a lot of spices, a big no-no, because now if you understand what happened, so as I said, we washed off a lot of the things from the walls of our intestines. So it'll take time for it to rebuild. Of course, your body is quite quick with it, and we're eating those soft things to help it out. But if you try to bombard it with spices, even some herbal teas that have a lot of spice, that could cause problems. So you may experience pain. And to avoid that, it's recommended that you really be gentle. So here you need to use your common sense, right? So be gentle with your digestive system in terms of what you put in. So steak with a lot of garlic is not gentle. As I said, very acidic, highly acidic lemons, oranges, pineapple, probably not gentle. Anything else with a lot of spice, most likely not gentle. So think of things like cooked rice, consistency of oatmeal, light fruit, maybe like bananas. Bananas seem like a pretty good choice because they're soft, they're a little fatty. Perhaps avocados seem like a good choice. Durian, if you have access to that, and so on. So as you notice, I'm giving a lot of raw food options, but that's because that's my nutritional pattern. So that's why I'm sharing a lot of those. But I'm sure if you use your head and common sense, you will come up based on your diet. You will come up with something that will help you. So perhaps for vegans, it might be things like couscous, cooked rice. Maybe some light sauces that are not spicy and so on. Tofu will probably make a good choice and so on. So hopefully you understand what the nutrition should look like. And yes, as I promised, I think I've explained the physiological consequences and what happens pretty well. Let's now talk about the actual energy part. So you remember I said, okay, if you're not likely to really take this worldview or don't have experience with the kind of the more subtle energy body realities, so you can omit that part and just listen to the first part. And now to the actual energy problems that this may help solve. So in our energy body, we have these energy centers. So they're like knots, right? And some more common term some more common term for them is chakra, right? So chakra in Sanskrit literally means like a wheel that's spinning. So it's a bundle of things that come together. So it's a lot of kind of energy channels that come together. And there are many of them in the human energy body, but most systems really talk about 7, right? So the 7 chakra energy system. And in particular, so when we begin at the bottom, it's the so-called root chakra, the Muladhara. Muladhara is responsible for really kind of being in the physical world and just being, anything about muscles, movement, just kind of living in reality, right? At the animalistic basic level. I'm not talking about living in the human society. I'm talking about living in basic reality. So it's, when a person's consciousness is located in that particular chakra, that's the consciousness of people who are at war. Say, at war, literally in the middle of the battle, the consciousness of, I guarantee you, of almost everyone involved will be at that chakra because it's all about survival. It's very primal, kind of animalistic, and that's what's going on. So the second chakra is the chakra called Svadhisthana. So Svadhisthana is the second center. It's located roughly just below your belly button. So it's along the line of the spine. And that chakra is actually quite interesting because in the typical good sense, it's responsible for things like procreation. It's responsible in humans for basic intelligence. So there are a lot of people who are actually strongly attached and whose consciousness lives in the Svadhisthana chakra, but who are actually exhibiting a lot of creative patterns, right? So they might be musicians or artists or just other people who create some stuff. But the problem is that those creations and artistry are usually at pretty low level. So it's either, I'm not going to be afraid of that word, it's either some pop musicians or artists that are, we're not trying to offend anybody, who are not that good. Picasso was not at that chakra, he was way higher. Van Gogh was also not at that chakra. There's another chakra actually located somewhere here in the neck and the head area that is responsible for the really high genius level of creation. So, as I mentioned, that chakra is also responsible, the Svadhisthana is also responsible for procreation. It's responsible for tastes and just emotions and in general kind of interacting with the world in that sense, right? And a lot of people, so these are the positive, if you will, sides, right? And if the person has problems at that chakra, so they may manifest in a variety of ways, one of which, for example, could be sex addiction, right? So the person has a problem in that they're draining energy from that particular energy center. So literally there is a hole and they're draining the energy by exhibiting certain sexual behavior, right? So maybe addicted. Pornophilia is a big problem, right? So maybe addicted to sex with their certain someone they have, right? So essentially living like rabbits. And unfortunately, to my big regret, the current powers that be are doing everything in the mainstream media, in the pop culture, to really advance that behavior. So they're not understanding these certain things and certain problems. The reasons why they're doing it or why they're not understanding is probably a topic for a whole separate video. But so the problem is that people live like rabbits nowadays, and essentially their minds are literally in the gutter, right? So in the very low second energy center. So that energy center, the problems there can be addressed by this very procedure I'm describing. So Shanka Prakshalana is actually probably the utmost top procedure, or Shatkarma. Shatkarma is the cleansing in yoga that addresses the problem with the second energy center. So if a person is addicted to sex or just any kind of sexual behavior like that, that's the recipe. If the person is addicted to any kind of taste, and by taste, I don't mean quantity. Quantity is the problem of the third chakra, so something called Manipura. Manipura is the kind of the human chakra, right? Manipura is where a lot of people live nowadays. right? It's the chakra of kind of doing basic business in the world, kind of basic competitiveness, earning material possessions and kind of basking in the material goods and, you know, accumulating stuff. So Manipura is all about accumulating material things. It can also be about accumulating knowledge. So I used to be like that a while ago. I would accumulate knowledge. You see there are a lot of books on that shelf. So I would try to accumulate knowledge. So, and of course later I learned and realized, had some experiences that that's actually the problem of Manipura, the third chakra. So we're not talking about quantity. We're talking about taste, salty, sweet, or spicy, and so on. So if somebody says, oh, you know, I love spicy food, or, you know, oh, I love salty, or they may not even realize, but they just go and do it, or put a lot of salt, or do this, or do that. That's exactly what's happening. So it's the chakra at which drainage of that energy happens. So of course it's not as massive as, say, you know, the sex addiction. So those are the doses of the energy that are drained during eating a little bit of spicy food and, you know, having some animalistic sex for a long time. They're incomparable. But nonetheless, the tastes also indicate that there is a problem with the second chakra. So hence, Shanka Prakshalana will address and help address these problems. So another issue might be something like music listening addiction. I certainly had that. So it's the emotions that music induces. And it's this feeling of good. Perhaps, you know, you have the goosebumps on your skin when you listen to certain music. That's exactly what's happening. It's the same way it's draining your energy via that chakra. So that's the issue that's happening. So once again, if you feel like, okay, if you don't feel that that's a problem, so that's probably not the video for you. But if, you know, something I'm saying resonates with you and you realize that you might have, and you actually realize that this is a problem, and you realize that the true normal view on reality should be equanimous, right? You should neither be jumping with joy, you should neither be really sad and down. You should just listen to music. Yes, that's a good composition, but you should not be addicted to it. So that's the whole idea of what I'm describing. So if you have some salty food, you could eat it, but you should not require it, right? That should not be the norm for you. So that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm not saying you should take a vow of celibacy, but you should not be addicted to it, right? If you're doing it to procreate children, how else can it be done? You know, that's the recipe there. So you do it, but you should not be addicted to it. So that's the whole thing. So if you're too much on the one side, on the side where you're doing it too much, Shanka Prakshalana is the way to address these problems. And it's a very, very, very powerful way. So in that sense, that can be treated, this procedure can be treated and considered as an addiction treating habit, right? It's literally addressing the causes of the problems, because all of the problems that every being has, every human has, they start at the level of energy. So the energy is primal, the material is secondary. So the material is what follows from the energy. So the reflections, or how our body looks, how our health looks in the material world, they all begin in our energy world, right? In the more subtle world. So I'm describing some of the concepts that are kind of well known in, say, Ayurvedic tradition and Ayurvedic medicine, right? So from the point of view of Ayurveda, a lot of the things we do in the West, they kind of look insane, because people just try to slap band-aids on the problems they have without actually addressing the cause. Well, so this thing will help you address the cause, because it's actually by stimulating physical organs in a certain way, by doing these asanas, which you will see at the end of this video, you will stimulate your physical reality, and then hence you will affect your energy body. So they're kind of coupled like that. So energy body will affect the physical reality, but from the physical reality you can also affect your energy. And so by doing that, you will be able to raise your energy higher. So by having this done, you might notice that certain symptoms or problems you've experienced in the past, they might go away or subside drastically. So that means your energy, you unclogged your certain blocks that were present in your energy channels. So the energy is now able to rise to your next center, which will be Manipura. As I said, that's a whole different center that's responsible more for quantities and other things. So if for some reason, I'm not going to try to put thoughts in your head, but I'm just going to give you some heads up. If after doing this procedure, sometime later, you notice that maybe you're accumulating stuff, or maybe you're starting to worry about quantities, or maybe you're eating more than you used to and you really want more, and you ate one plate and you were looking at another one, 30 minutes later. Well, in a sense, congratulations to you, because it means that you've successfully moved the energy, you've unblocked something. So now you have less of the second world problems, and now you have the, let's call it third world problems, because now you're actually dealing with problems at the higher level, right? I'm not saying they're easier or anything to solve, but it's certainly better than the lower problems, right? Those are kind of animalistic. So that's the way to get the consciousness up. So you have to successfully deal with problems at every level, and there will be problems at every level, and we can discuss this in some other video. So friends, before we part, let me describe the quick light version of this. So the light version is only different in that you only do about 2 or 3 rounds of drinking exercises. You can do it anytime in the morning and then go to work. Just be prepared that sometime you may need to use the restroom rather unexpectedly. But the point there is that we're not going to cleanse the whole thing. We will move that water through the whole system, but we're not going to really make sure that the clean stuff comes out. We just move it once. So whatever you drink, maybe it's like a half a gallon or a little less. You drink, do exercises, drink exercises about 2-3 times. And then if something comes out, great. If not, you can go on, do the work, or move on and lead your life, whatever you're doing during that day. Just be prepared to use the restroom. So it's a thing you can do almost every day. I probably don't recommend it every day unless you have some issues like constipation and so on. It will really successfully, it should be able to successfully help with that and really improve the situation. Otherwise, it can be used for great stimulation and just helping to move things along. And it certainly has some energy effect and some stimulation of the energy body, just not as drastic as the full procedure that I described earlier that takes a few hours. So once again, I really appreciate it. I hope you heed the advice of being really careful, and I suggest you go read about it. If you need some more references, comment, and I will try to find something. I know there are a lot of references in the Russian-speaking world that I can find, and perhaps I can also find something in the English-speaking world. But thus far, after YouTubing this procedure, I wasn't even able to find anything solid when it comes to videos. So perhaps you can use this, and this will get you started. So, and be careful and learn to do the asanas. If you're doing it for the first time, I suggest you do the asanas. They have a really tremendous benefit of their own. They don't have to be done just with this procedure. Asanas can be done on their own. But when you're doing the procedure, please follow the order. When you're doing it on your own time, so to speak, then you can do them in any order or combine them with some other routines that you have. So at the end of this video, you will see how to do the asanas. And once again, thanks for watching. See you in the next videos.